Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Dean here again from Lloyd Consulting Co. Just Conversations, episode 20. I never thought we'd get there, but Just Conversations, solution-focused communication with the goal of informing systemic change. And as always, my next guest needs no introduction. Over to you, Debbie.
Hi, Dean. Thanks for having me today as number 20. Honoured and privileged to be here and have a conversation with you. So thank you. I'm here in Magajan, and before we start, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land here, the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. I want to acknowledge elders past and present, and I want to acknowledge that I'm on unceded, colonised, stolen land of the Magajan people here in this area, Magajan. So yes, as a white colonial settler who is not 20 years old, even though I'd like to be, since episode 20, maybe 20 times 3 plus some other ones. But I'm born and bred here, basically on the north side of Brisbane. And I think I spent half of my life on the north side, half in the south, and now I'm based in the city more so now over the last couple of years. It's been a journey of which now I suppose can be articulated, a journey to abolish the prison industrial complex. So that's my life journey and passion, and what I will continue to fight for, no doubt, until the day I die. I'm also a proud mum and a proud nana, and of course raising my grandchildren to be able to live in a world that it's free of any form of violence, which is difficult, as you would know and listeners would know, because of the world that we live in, and more so not just because of racial capitalism and the racial gender violence of policing, but because of the genocide that's going on in Palestine right now, which is an indication of, it is genocide, but also colonisation, which happened here in this country over 200 years ago. So all the dots are connected for me as a abolitionist that wants to see the end of all forms of violence and the prison industrial complex more so.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. I knew that we'd start off hot. Not that that's hot for, I think you know what I mean. You're a person who has lived experience of the justice system, I believe.
Yes, I'm formerly incarcerated. That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so just how long have you been out? And I don't want to get your age involved.
The last time I was in, basically I was first put in a child's prison when I was 13, which is 50 years ago. So I've been in this system for 5 decades, and I need to say the only thing that's changed is the expansion of that system. It's all right. The dogs are running around. Oh my God.
All good.
Sorry, someone's shutting the door. The dogs have got the Zooms and they just knocked the whole thing flying. So as a 13-year-old is when I first, is that what you're pointing at? Into children's prison. Yeah, sorry. This lay knocks it over. This was given to me by Celeste Tapiapa, who was killed in the women's prison on November 30th, 2021, as prison officers held her down with a spitted over her head as she screamed out 4 times, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe," and 6 times she needed a puffer, and even the prison officer who was putting the spittle on her head said it's suffocating her, but it didn't stop. But yeah, so Beautiful Family gave me this at the end of the last lot of hearings of her inquest just a week and a half ago. So maybe that's not the best place there on those paintings. But the last time that I was convicted and sent to prison was in 1989. And for those offences, which are drug trafficking, which I was looking at a mandatory life sentence under the Drug Misuse Act. But as we know, when, you're going through the system, going through the court system, plea deals are offered. And so a plea deal was offered to myself and my husband because, he was a high-profile football player then with the Broncos in State of Origin. And they wanted him to plead guilty so that they dropped the mandatory life charges on me. anyway, long story short, that happened, and I ended up getting sentenced to 6 years imprisonment at Bogger Road. So that's the last time that I was in prison. So was released in 1992. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So what's that? 32 years ago, nearly 32 years ago.
Yeah, I'm at 22 now at the moment. I only had one instance, but and what I wanted really to highlight there is how well you've gone on, and I think you've studied, you've got a law degree now, is that correct? And other things in the way, but just how when people are given access to things and supports and adequates, people can change. So yeah, and I really appreciate the way that you articulate and carry yourself as a person with lived experience. Yeah, I find it inspirational. So thank you for that. And you'd sort of touched on my next question is like what have you witnessed since you've come out, whether it's been improvements or anything like that? Like where is that, like, has it evolved in any way, shape or form, the industrial complex as you see it?
Well, how it's evolved is it's got bigger and more powerful, and it uses its resources to convince the community that some people need to be criminalised and imprisoned and others don't. And very much, has created a law and order auction, and where particularly groups of people in our community are targeted by the state, and the state as their players, which is the racial gender violence of policing, who target Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, more so women and girls. They're the fastest growing group in the prison system now, but also poor white people, people who are homeless, people with mental health issues. So basically, prison has become the default response for all social issues because governments are not providing the services or funding the services that we all need in the community. So racial capitalism relies on the haves and the have-nots. And so the have-nots are targeted to be criminalised and imprisoned. And fundamentally part of that, of racial capitalism, is the employment strategy to give people jobs to cage us, instead of thinking of other ways how we can be whole human beings and not be targeted and caged. Because we also know that racial capitalism makes all of us feel hyper responsible for anything we do or don't do, right? So when you're in prison, even if you know there's, for example, we have a massive homelessness, right, issue across this country right now. I think it's something like 3,000 people are homeless every hour now in this country, and which is horrific. And even knowing that, and you're someone in prison and the screws give you 10 numbers to ring to find housing for yourself to be released, and you can't. But you feel hyper responsible because you can't find it, and the system makes you feel like that. The prison officers say, well, if you can't find housing, you can't find housing, not our problem. Well, we know it's the state that hasn't been building and providing public housing for everybody. As population grows, how the targeted racial gender violence of policing, who's criminalised and who's imprisoned, how laws have eroded rights like bail, the people in prison on remand, for example, is at nearly 40%. That's because they're deemed to not have an appropriate address, or they are homeless, or they need mental health services and they aren't in the community. So that's why I talk about that prison is the default response for social services and supports in our community across this country. Well, in Western world, it's not just here. It's, racial capitalism is everywhere. It's a framework that's used, that's relied on. And so then, because of that hyper responsibility, we have lost the ability to see other human beings or care for other human beings. We actually see some human beings that can be disposed of. And we very much see that in the prison system of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And like I said before, we see that in regards to Palestine and the genocide of Palestinian people, and that they can be disposed of without the world even blinking as such.
Yeah, I know I'm speechless around stuff like that. I can't even comprehend how people believe that war is a solution, for one, or violence is just like, where as a social construct have we come up with that, like I do, it's a rhetorical question, but like we're creating these environments where violence and, you know, even the knife stuff, like where are these people seeing it, things that, oh, a knife's a good idea to solve my problems. It's really sort of an upside down world at the moment around all of that sort of stuff, and the haves and the have nots. And especially coming out of COVID, how, you know, all of these pharmaceutical companies got extensively rich overnight because of whatever. And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist as such, but you know, one of the things that I really do value in your work is you're very, from my opinion, you're very good at staying in your lane. Women, getting them out on bail, really chipping away systemically. Can you talk a bit more about that strategy, just for other people that may be coming up, what that's like and the benefits of that?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, what I just want to say, go back to what you said, it's not a war in regards to Palestine and Israel. It's a genocide.
Yeah,
Israel,
yeah. Language is
it's,
important.
you know, two groups of people that have similar weapons to fight against each other. The Palestinian people have nothing, and they are being killed systematically because of genocide. So I think we get caught up when the media and politician uses language, and language is really important as well when we talk about the whole prison industrial complex, because there's words that are used that actually cause us harm, and there's words that are used, language that's used that actually keeps us in that stagnant, constant being of, for example, offender. You know, I might have offended once, I might have offended 5 times, but it doesn't mean that's who I am today. But when you call me an offender, it causes fear for others to think that any time I might actually do something that harms you. And so we need to unpack the language that the prison industrial complex has taken on board and uses against it. So, you know, one of the examples for adult women in adult prisons, we're called girls. We're not girls. We're adult women. We're mothers. We're grandmothers. We're aunties. We're daughters. We're sisters. You know, we're many things, but we're definitely not girls. But to use the language girls means that we need to be treated in a specific way because we're not adult women. So we get treated in a derogatory way as girls with no agency. You know, for us, when last time I was in prison, my close friend got murdered sitting beside me in January 1990. And so a spotlight hit the prison internationally because, one, people didn't realise women were in prison. And two, because another woman had killed another woman inside prison, right, which was unheard of.
Yeah.
And from that, you know, the whole management of the system was moved on, sacked, and then a new layer of managers came in. And at that time, because it was overcrowded, you know, and this is what the machine always talks about. When prisons are overcrowded, all of a sudden they care about our humanity, and, you know, we've got to build a new prison because they're uncomfortable. La, la, la. And so they build then a 300 cell prison or a 1,000 cell prison, you know, and they don't give a shit because that gets filled. And here we are now in this jurisdiction that once again, all the prisons are over capacity, and no doubt they will build more. But back then it was overcrowded and there was like 103 women, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And on any single day, which is compared to now here, it's like nearly 1,000 on any one day. So, you know, you can see how the machine works and how they use language to do that. But so what happened is we were used as an experiment by corrections to what they did is set up these committees around whether it was medical or visits or food, street kids, because a lot of us came from being homeless kids and were pipelined into the adult system, lifers and long-termers group. So, you know, we used to meet with the general manager once a month to advocate for things to change internally in that women's prison. That taught those of us who were like the conveners of those individual committees that met together with the GM once a month to think around corners about how they think and what they're going to say in response to our, you know, proposals. And but when I got released, you know, like I said to the women in there, I'll be back. And the screws said, yeah, you'll be back in handcuffs. So I go, I'll be back. And, you know, the general manager at the time let me come back And we used to meet at the chapel, not with screws, just ourselves, and that's how Sisters Inside started. And fundamentally, we started because what we wanted, the main purpose, the main thing that we wanted and agitated for was our voice, to hear us. We're sick and tired of people talking about us without us, and that still happens today. And so that's why I got an issue about lived experience as a label, because I call myself formerly incarcerated, because lots of people are now claiming this lived experience, and the system's claiming it to get someone who's had a lived experience, or whatever that is, because I ask people, a lived experience of what? Because it's not about just your lived experience, it's about your analysis of how the world operates. And also, are you
to articulate it, I believe, like an individual's capacity to articulate that palatable. Yeah.
Well, for me, I speak about women and girls and their families, their children daily. But I do that because I'm endorsed to do it by Women Inside. I'm transparent, I'm held accountable, I go back into the prison. We have a committee still 30 years on of women that check me, keep me in line, if you like, challenge me. I remember when the Gatton Women's Prison the minister called me in to say that they're taking the men out and putting the women there because the prison, Brisbane Women's was overcrowded. So, we're worried about the women. It's like, no, you're fucking not.
Stop locking them up.
You're expanding the industry. You're expanding the power within, within the portfolio of prisons. And sure enough, that prison's fucking full now as well. Forgot what I was going to say, what we were talking about. But it was about, okay, so I was out because it was also that prison at the time that the men were in, it was a private prison run by Serco.
Yeah.
And, I was very vocal about private prisons, and there shouldn't be private prisons. Why are corporations running prisons? If we as a community, and I use the we, then they need to be public prisons and be held accountable, right? And so when the first lot of women went into Gatton, small numbers, the lifers and long-termers who I'm still much connected to, asked me to come in. I'd come and say, and they go, Debbie, can you stop fucking saying get rid of the private prison? They're so good. We get a menu, pick meals. It's like, fuck that. This isn't about you. This is about the women coming. Next year, the year later, a decade later. I said, don't worry, it'll get bad. It might be fine at the moment because you just come out of a cell with 2 or 3 women into a single cell. And yes, I understand that and I totally respect that. But we need to have this analysis about what the prison industrial complex is doing. And so, sure enough, within 6 months' time, they go, you won't believe this place is fucked. And I'm like, oh, can I do the told you so dance? Seriously. And but we have those conversations. So when I talk about being formerly incarcerated, or anyone else talks about their lived experience or formerly incarcerated, you must be going back into the prison, whether you're a man or you're a woman, however you identify, and be held accountable by those inside. You can't just go into a committee and talk about your own ideas, what you want, when you have no goddamn idea what women need or men need inside, or trans people, whoever it is. If Aboriginal or not, what is actually required in that system. We've got to stop talking in silos. We must have an analysis of the prison industrial complex. It's not expertise just to say I've got lived experience. No. That's an experience, and only that, full stop. And this is our problem, because all these carceral organisations, whether it's the Academy or NGOs, are grabbing individuals with lived experience and then flaunting them out in public to say, look, we have a lived experience. We're getting directed by them. No, you're not. Yeah. You're not taking any notice. You're doing a tick and flick how it was done decades ago for Aboriginal people to be on a board, tick. Now it's lived experience of prison, tick. Or it's lived experience without we know what the fucking lived experience actually is. It could be lived experience in a watch house and they're talking about prisons. It could be lived experience of a drug addiction, but they're talking about women in prison or men in prison. It's once again a carceral response to capture individuals, to not only pay them. Is another problem. And of course people want a job. I totally understand and I get that. But
And it's
don't,
nice to feel wanted too, because I remember sitting in that space for a bit and I was like, oh, this is nice. Everyone wants to hear my voice and I'm really fucking important. Why?
next minute, lady, you're not,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're important about 2 seconds flat. And
Yeah.
who do we let down? We become traitors to those that we were caged with. You know,
Yeah.
and I refuse to be a traitor to women in prison and girls, because that's who I am here to advocate for and agitate for. And, you know, Sisters Inside, we employ lots of formerly incarcerated women and girls. We, you know, we do the work that needs to be done to give us the voice, because we demand a seat at the table. And that's why we also, a number of years ago, started the National Network of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. We demand a seat at the table. We're sick and tired of people talking about us without us, particularly those who are not connected. You know, you need to be connected to our network to be speaking out about us,
Yeah,
because then
yeah.
as a unified front, and then when you don't get picked off. And we're very clear at Sisters Inside, we're very clear on the National Network that we are abolitionists,
Yeah.
and everything we do is abolition in practice. So, you know, people over the years, men have rung me. I've had male lawyers argue with me about, and even men who've been in prison, you know, why don't you set up brothers inside? I go, because I'm not a brother. Like, I'm not a brother, you're
Yeah,
a brother.
yeah, no, totally
You
get
don't
it.
do it. Seriously. Like, I had this big argument with this lawyer once, saying, you know, can you, why don't you set up brothers inside? I said, because I'm not a brother.
Yeah,
Like, why don't you brothers set it up? And he's like, huh? You're a
yeah.
brother. You're asking me, a woman, to set up brothers inside. You go set up brothers inside if you're so worried about the brothers. Seriously. You know, men, you mob aren't stupid. You can
No,
organise yourself
yeah.
quite well. So brothers can
And
sort out
that's,
their
I
brothers,
think, what
and
I was
sisters.
getting at is,
Yeah.
you know, oddly enough, from what I think I heard you just say is you learnt how to do that and start to strategically do that while you're incarcerated to, you know, get the committees together, build on that, and look at where you are now. And I think I want to really touch on the gaslighting nature of corrections. So the language that they use allows us, you know, they're calling you girls, it allows that disconnect and it invites that disconnect. So it's like, oh, they're calling them girls, but actually that's not who they are. So it's just wrong from the start, foundationally. And I always say that, you know, and I hate criminologists as well. You know,
Well, look,
people don't have criminogenic needs. We are human and we have an inherent need to be treated humanely. So what are these
criminology,
labels?
they study us, they make a life out of it,
Yeah,
they make their career out of it. You know, why aren't you studying the racial gendered violence of the state? Why are you studying us as individuals? Like, we're the problem, we're
yeah,
the
yeah.
deficit. We aren't the deficit, we're the ones who've been targeted and continue to be targeted. Go
Yeah,
and do something that actually is required. So I spoke at the ANZOC gave me like a this award at the end of
yeah, I've
last year.
seen that. Yeah,
And I did when I was given it, I actually spoke to them about how they're the problem.
yeah,
And you go, like, I published that, and you know, and I'm going to write a piece about it to go into their journal or whatever they put in. But I mean, the academy is the problem. Even the academy, those that say that, whether they're criminalists or whatever, are
yeah.
abolitionists. They're not. They're absolutely not, because they're not putting abolition in practice. You know, even people in the community who, abolition's a sexy word now, right? Since George
Oh,
Floyd
it's
had
there.
abolition, but no one's practicing it. Everyone jumps on these words and actually don't practice it, because one of the hardest things to do is practice abolition when we have been socialised
Oh, yeah.
in the carceral cage all the time, you know, no matter what.
Essentially, that's
Time.
why I ceased working like going into prisons, because how I see it is, if I'm going in there, I'm somewhat propping it up at some stage, and, you know, each to their own. And, you know, I'll support abolitionists all the way through. But what I realized is, you know, there's a lot of do-gooders going in there going, oh, we need to, you know, make it more comfortable for people. And like, I've got guys ringing me from Clarence going, oh, it's really good here. I said, mate, if it's really fucking good, don't come home. Like, what do you want to get out for? Don't ever ring me from prison and tell me how fucking good it is.
But the question, it's the wrong question being asked. And that's how people are socialised.
Yeah.
Because they accept it there. And if they feel that it's good, you know, like I would say to women or a woman, well, okay, if it's good, so you're saying you'd rather be here than outside. Oh, fuck no, fuck no.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about this. Because when you say it's good, it's actually saying and propping up the castle state. Okay, so we need to unpack that. So it's about having the language. I will always go into prison because there's women until no women and girl is in prison. And for me, I don't feel like I'm propping up the system. I need to have those conversations with individual women and groups of women about how we live in there, because we are living in there, we are living in cages. Because one of the fundamental things about racial capitalism and being a hyper responsible individual is about divide and conquer. And prisons do that wonderfully. Set groups of people or individuals against each other. So a lot of the work that I do is about, hey, we're in here together, we support each other. I don't say Mary there's got to be your best friend, but we are in this together. They are the enemy. We are not each other's enemy. And until we can see who the enemy is, we can start fighting and tearing the walls down. But the state is very good and the prison system's very good at pitching groups of people, Aboriginal people, white people against Aboriginal people,
Division.
Whatever it is. And we've got to stop that because we are the ones caged and we have to look after each other to have some form of humanity to survive. Otherwise you die. And see that we're socialised. Like I said, racial capitalism, the prison industrial complex does all this hyper individual responsibility where then we see other people as our enemy, other people in cages as our enemy or our annoyance. Because more so these days than when I was in prison, majority of people in prison now have really severe mental health issues that it's not addressed. And yes, we know the noise, the repetitive behaviour, all those things can really piss you off. But it's about how do you actually build a relationship to be able to support that person or those people with mental illness so that they're not being targeted and killed inside the system and harmed. Because once they're gone, they focus on us. So we need to focus on each other to keep each other alive, no matter who we are. And, one of the things that I would love, from today, say it's today, 2:00 right now, on the 30th of May, 2024. Imagine if we lived in a world that every baby that was born from now on never experienced any form of harm or violence, ever. Imagine what the world, I say imagine what the world will be like in 20 years or 30 years. I don't think I could imagine, but I know it'll be a very different world than what we live in. If not one person, not one baby born from right now onwards, never experienced any form of harm. And I don't mean individually, I also mean by the state.
Well, the poverty trap and all that sort of, financial violence and all of that stuff. There's a vast amount of people living far below the poverty line at the moment. I work in community housing and a housing first model, and it's just like it's atrocious what's happening at the moment. Atrocious. In a country that's as rich as ours.
Given a home that they want to be in, the money that they need, and no violence. Imagine how different the world would be. Like I said, I can't even imagine what the world would look like, but I mean, it would definitely be a world that I would feel free in and want to live in and not have to worry about anything else, that we could become whoever we want, to be able to engage with whatever we want, to be able to dream what way we want to dream, to be creative in any way we want to be. The world would be so different. Like, that's what we've got to work to, and that's what I do not only with women and girls, but my grannies, my grandchildren. I want them to live a life without violence. But it's very difficult when there's so much violence around us day in, day out.
Yeah, it is. It's, so I done a fellowship last year and I hated the title of my, what is it? A roadmap to reducing recidivism. And I was like, I don't believe in the title. It doesn't exist. Reducing recidivism is an oxymoron. But just those those approaches that we need to have around increasing capacity. Like everything we do seems to be risk averse, deficit based. My theory on it is, imagine if when someone was getting released from prison, what skills do you have? How are you going to contribute when you're released? And how can we help you contribute? And what can we do to give you access to that? Whereas now you're assessed as a risk. Like you're a risk. If you think I'm that risky, don't let me out. Look, if I'm that much of a risk.
3Rs are so fucking caught
Oh,
up in the, prison industrial complex. So recidivism, for example, is again targeted to make us feel hyper responsible for our failure. When I go to prison, if I have a mental health condition, if I'm homeless, if I'm poor, all of those things, and I stay in prison, prison don't do anything about that. They let me out. So my mental health's worse. I still don't have a place. I don't have income. But then if I get recriminalised by the cops and go back in, I'm held responsible for recidivism. The state is not, when they don't provide any services. That's why I talk about prison as the default response, right? Because they keep cycling. And so we've got to move away from, recidivism, reform. Rehabilitation's another one of those words.
yeah. Prison is not a place designed to be rehabilitated. That's another gaslighting experience.
Yeah, I go another step. I don't need to be fucking rehabilitated. I am who I am, who I am, who I am. And the things that I did were deemed criminal, and I was arrested. The only thing I needed to change in my life by race ribbon is not do the things that got me criminalised and imprisoned in the instance, and still to live. Because people come out of prison thinking they got to be this totally different person, and you don't. Because we're so much more than the worst thing we've ever done. And if it's deemed the worst thing we've done is by going to prison, well, God help us all. Not that I've ever gone, but I mean, it's this once again of being hyper responsible as an individual when the state is supposed to be.
Well, the other thing that gets me is charity. Like the last thing I needed when I got out was charity. I needed opportunity to participate. And I can't even unpack that yet because we've only got a short period of time. And I really want to ask you this question.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do that brings you joy in your life so you can bring that into other people in these violent spaces?
What do I bring joy in my life? I think yes, these places of violence, but my joy is connecting with the women inside and the women outside who've been in cages and out of cages and who are struggling, because those relationships individually and collectively is my passion, and that's my community. And that's what brings me joy. My grandchildren bring me great joy, absolute joy, to the depths of love that I didn't know existed in many ways until you are a grandparent. I'm lucky enough. My husband lives over in Minjuraba, otherwise known as Stradbroke Island, and so I'll go and spend weekends there and stay there within the Aboriginal community there at Minjuraba, which I feel very privileged to be able to do that, to be able to just walk across the park and go up the road to have a coffee and sit in front of the ocean and watch the water flow, how it, decides to flow itself.
Love the ocean.
And watching whales. I love whales.
Yeah. Nice. No, just because we are out of time, I just wanted to squeeze that in. I could talk for hours on this topic. I feel,
so much.
I really get your passion and the sense that shines through in everything that you do. So thank you for your work. Thank you for leading the way in these spaces in Australia. I really appreciate it. It's good always to look over and see that someone else is passionate and doing the work that you want to do. So is there anything you want to spruik, sell, tell us about that's coming up? Sisters Inside, anything?
Oh, lots of things. Gee, on the
Put you on the spot, sorry. We've only got 2 minutes left too.
What's happening is the National Network and Sisters Inside, we're going to Canberra in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be spending a couple of days down there, not only going into the prison to see the women in the prison in the ACT, but also to be in Parliament and speak about all the things that we need as incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and girls around this country And of course, what we would really love is to be able to have funding, to have a secretariat to drive that, because we've got dreams, the national network, of us all about being in every women's prison and do the work that needs to be done. That's not actually from a carceral framework. So, and of course, Sisters Inside, we're, what are we, 30, I can't even work it out, 32 years on, and surviving. I suppose one of the biggest concerns is about the election October. Now, if the LNP get in, they will probably attack us again like they did last time.
Yeah.
But I mean,
You're doing something right.
We're so used to the state's violence, bring it on, because we got strategies to push back. And you're not going to, because we started, Sisters Inside started in prison, and it was about us having a voice. And one thing the state or the prison, any system, can never take from us is our voice.
Yeah.
It's only if we give our voice up, and we will never give our voice up. We will stay in our lane, run straight, and you will always hear us.
Thank you, Debbie, so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Dean.